In the SEC this past weekend, it was a lackluster weekend. Georgia had the bye week, and there weren't really any big football games in the SEC. We chose to pay attention to Arkansas and Auburn to maybe take a look at those two teams. It didn't show us a whole lot. Vanderbilt and Missouri was kind of a good football game, and at least it was interesting. It, again, didn't tell us much about either team. The big game, I suppose, the marquee SEC game was Oklahoma and Tennessee. And again, it's not really evident
what we learned in that game. Oklahoma seemed offensively challenged,
but they didn't hang 70 points on them. And the way I looked at that game, it could have gone several different directions. And Oklahoma, had they been able to punch some opportunities in, could have made that interesting. Even at the very end, had the ball at the 3-yard line, down by 10. I mean, possible. With a minute or so left, they could have got the touchdown, gone for the onside, and got a tying field goal and won in overtime. Well, you had to have an offense to do any of that, and Oklahoma didn't have any. We're going to break down the action a little bit just a little later. Right now, we just want to recap kind of how the week felt, take a look around at the rest of the country, top 25 games, with any big games there. Nebraska and Illinois. Nebraska is still being Nebraska. I don't think that program's headed anywhere. Ohio State had a little trouble with Marshall early, settled into a nice little blowout like we expected. Notre Dame got back on track. The LSU playing UCLA. Come on, what kind of team is UCLA? The nation was probably excited about Michigan, USC. To me, they're eating themselves. Michigan is not, in my opinion, one of the top teams in the Big Ten this year. They're ranked 18th. USC is ranked 11th. And USC has beaten an SEC team, so we're watching that. And they got beat. Close game. So that simply equals out the Big Ten just a little bit. Miami is playing South Florida, and so we don't know anything really about any team. Is Texas going to play a regular team? You keep looking at the weeks, and they don't play anybody. They played Michigan. They got a break. All the big teams really got breaks because they're marquee games to open the season, which let them play the gimme games after. And so here we are, week 4, and no one's played anybody because Georgia got a pass. Clemson wasn't any competition. Michigan wasn't any competition for Texas. And so we really haven't seen anything. Alabama hasn't played anybody. Miami hasn't played anybody. And I looked at the schedules in the summer and said we're going to be around week 5 and we won't know any more than we know now in July. And I'm right. But not knowing anything about the teams doesn't stop the narrative from growing. Every year, the networks, the two biggest ones, there's a general narrative, and they basically take a little and make a lot out of it. Texas, a perfect example. Right now, you think they may as well just give Texas the title. They're scoring. They got 2 great quarterbacks. Going to talk about Texas a little later. You see, it comes down to culture. Football programs are victims of their own culture. That's not maybe intentionally created, but it's created. And Texas has a culture problem in it's not really known outside of the Texas fan base just how this culture works. But there's a lot of pressure for Arch Manning to be the quarterback. Now, Sark has played in the last 2 games because Evers was hurt, so-called. I haven't actually checked to see how bad he's hurt. But Arch had a decent day Saturday. Started to throw a couple of picks. He had some. It wasn't a beautiful football game. So when Evers gets back, I'm sure Arts will step back and sit on the bench. But that's going to be potentially something that could derail that Texas team. Having those two good quarterbacks might not be the best thing in the world. And Sark is going to find out that it hasn't worked for anybody at Texas because of the pressure from the boosters to play people as if they were the coach. That's just a problem. Mac Brown had that problem. Not as big a problem as he had yesterday when he lost a game, scoring 50 points, and it was the first time in his history that ever happened. It should be. It should be a first for any coach. Scores 50 in a losing cause. I think there's probably a handful of games on NCAA records where that happened. We don't need to get basketball games started in football, but that was terrible. Lost 70 to 50. I think they were down 50 to something at the half. I don't want to even look it up. So North Carolina is just another piece of the junkyard of the ACC. Clemson, I can't say Clemson without clicking. Dabo Swinney seems to have righted the ship at Clemson. Did it again. Dabo Swinney seems to have righted the ship. Everybody's talking about how much they are scoring at Clemson. They are scoring. They're playing garbage. Clemson is built to play in the ACC. It is what it is. So it's going to be interesting to see if Miami can just railroad that conference, and they might be good. We don't know. Texas might really be as good as they look. We don't know. Is Georgia as bad as they looked against Kentucky? We don't know. Does Georgia have a real problem with offense? Do they suddenly forget how to run Todd Monken's offense? Remember, they hired someone to run an offense, not to do something that they want to do. Mike Bobo hasn't run the Todd Monken offense yet. I don't know if they can fix it. Georgia keeps bemoaning they don't have Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers. Yeah, but I bet you they got some players that could do similar things if you call the plays. Georgia's got a problem. Offensively, and then they'll come out and probably explode against Alabama, make me look like a liar. I hope so. I'm not really sure it's going to happen. I don't know a coaching staff that was capable of the Kentucky game. You're just going to have to wait and see. So far, here we are 5 weeks in. Here we are 5 weeks in as week 5 comes up, and we don't know anything. And will we even learn anything after that? So let's talk about maybe the one team that was the big winner Saturday. You have to probably say it was Tennessee. They went on the road, played a Oklahoma team, a legacy team. We don't know how good Oklahoma really is. They had the best quarterback in the universe, according to everybody that had an opinion, and they benched him early, and that was their offense. So what did Tennessee really get done? Well, they went on the road and they won a game. Josh Heupel is a good football coach, and that's all Tennessee really needed. The train wreck that they were living for after Pruitt or all the coaches they had. They finally got it fixed, I guess, and they're in good shape for the NIL. So Tennessee looks like a program on the rise. They did what they had to do. They didn't necessarily impress anybody and dazzle anybody, but they went out and won a road SEC game, something that you have to do. And you can at least say they won it a lot better than Georgia did with Kentucky. So Tennessee goes into the playoff check mark. We're going to just take a quick recap. and see what teams really have a shot for the playoffs. We thought of Missouri as one of those teams. They struggled with Vanderbilt the whole game, but was that really a bad thing? Vanderbilt is just a couple of plays away from being undefeated, and they have actually played real football teams during that stretch. Vanderbilt isn't terrible this year. And Missouri looks like a team that's waiting to show itself. They haven't really looked good, but I think they have a good program there. And I think, I said it all summer, I think they're going to be something to be dealt with. And the fact that their schedule is very, very favorable, I'm going to put Missouri in the playoff box. So, SEC probably gets 4 teams in this playoff, and it could be more. It depends on how bad the season turns out. That you may only get the token winners of the weaker conferences, and it could be 5 SEC teams. It could. I'm not saying it will, but we're basing it on those generally going to be 4. So, which 4 SEC teams make the playoffs? Obviously, Alabama and Georgia have to be considered until they play themselves out. I don't see LSU being that kind of team, even though they could actually somehow win enough games to be that kind of team. So it's Alabama and Georgia, Tennessee and Missouri. At this point, are the SEC playoff teams. Let us know in the comments if you disagree or agree. And give us your 4 or 5. Now, what if there's a 5th team? A 5th SEC team after the 4 mentioned. I didn't even mention Texas, so there you go. I keep thinking Texas is in the Big 12, and same with Oklahoma. Forgive me for that. They're new, and I'm not even sure Texas is going to be a playoff team. So maybe it wasn't a mistake. What are you talking about? I'm talking about I really don't think they could self-destruct. Georgia could beat them. Their schedule isn't tough. But I guess we have to count Texas. So there's your playoff teams. Everybody else go home. Now, what's going to happen to all these teams that don't make the playoffs when that transfer portal's wide open during the playoffs? Man, that's just going to be terrible. That's going to be a real train wreck. And so really, they're going to have to fix this, the college football. We've got to have ways to get 3-year players to be a standard. We've got to get that fixed. I think they will, and it's going to be a bumpy train ride until they do. Right now, we're basically, as college football fans, watching a sport that has essentially no supervision, and they have some crazy legal angles that they may not be able to fix it right away. But it's not really even interesting to talk about how it might shape out. It's like, what are we dealing with right now? What's it going to be like when we get these playoff teams settled in and the guy that's 13th is going to get rated? The guy that loses the first round is going to get rated. And on and on and on. And then the championship games that you see won't even reflect the teams that we saw in this putrid season. And I think it's a given that what we've seen so far is nothing more than a preseason. And they said that playoffs going to 12 wouldn't ruin the regular season. Well, so far, it's doing a pretty good job. Because nobody's even getting worried if they lose. Georgia loses to Alabama, they can still be in the playoffs. Alabama will be in the playoffs picture even if they lose to Georgia. Bama wins, they'll be probably the front runner. It's going to get messy. I'm really looking forward to these next few weeks, though, because then we're going to see things happen. Because these teams are going to start playing each other, and that ESPN narrative will just have to respect reality, something they don't like to do.